because the three of us want to cooperate, we want to save money, we want to make this work. It's like what they say, what happens when you care for something bigger than yourself. You know, and it's bigger than me, it's bigger than Richard, it's bigger than Sue, it's bigger than their marriage. It's this collective decision. We want to be part of creating a different type of culture, and we know we have to change in order to make that work.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Janaea, this is my friend Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Janaea. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Well, it looks like a regular car.
It is a regular car.
It's a regular car.
Well, but what you do with it isn't regular.
Well, that's true.
That's true.
Come on in, have a cup of tea. Let's talk about it.
Oh, you didn't want any.
That's okay.
But it looks pretty in the cup.
It looks beautiful, yes.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Judy Donaldson. My guests today are from Port Townsend, and I'm with Judy Alexander and Richard Dandridge. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
What we're talking about, that car outside that looks like an ordinary car, but you don't treat like an ordinary vehicle, is a car that's shared among three of you. You and your wife, Sue, Richard, and you, Judy, a neighbor. I mean, which is kind of an unusual way to have one less car in the world. So tell us, how did this get started?
Well, I think it started because my wife and I had been carless years ago when we had small kids. And my wife wanted to get back to that situation, and I was a little hesitant. I wanted the flexibility to still have a car, and by that time I thought Judy might be a good candidate to explore car sharing.
How did you get to know, I mean, how did you?
We didn't know each other very well when he approached me with this, and it was interesting to me to have that request to think about. But
I think we arranged a breakfast to raise the topic.
yeah, Sue
We came over to Judy's.
So you're neighbors, is that, I mean,
we live, I think I've counted, I think we live 6 blocks apart.
Okay.
All right.
He lives downhill.
It's an
6
easy
blocks.
walk.
It is an easy walk. And we knew each other a little bit through an organization that we're both members of, but I would say we didn't know each other very well.
Right.
And Richard knew of my interest in culture change and conservation and all that stuff, and I didn't have a clue the extent to which Sue and Richard had been carless. I didn't know any of that history at the time.
We were new to town.
I just had moved to Port Townsend. And Richard came to me and said, would you be interested in having a conversation with us about that? And I went, well, yeah, why don't you come over to breakfast? We'll talk about it over breakfast. So I think that was probably 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, going on at least 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got the feeling listening to Sue. Sue makes it very clear that she would just as soon not own a car. And at least that's how she felt at the beginning of this arrangement. And I got the feeling, well, wow, I'm kind of a bridge person for these two people that don't agree about whether to sell their car or not. And I thought it would probably be in my interest to be a car sharer. So we talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then what happened?
Well, that conversation led into kind of an informal agreement. I mean, it's all informal in a way, but less formal then than it is now, where I would borrow their car for long trips that I wanted to take out of town. See, I had a Toyota Corolla station wagon with 220,000 miles on it, and I loved my car. It still got good gas mileage, but I was just a little nervous being like, 100 miles from home with a car that seemed like it was, more possible that it would break down.
Okay.
So their car became my second car of option to use when I was taking a long distance trip. And when I knew I wanted to take a trip, I would just email or call Richard and say, what about this 3-day weekend? Do you need a car? I'd like to use it.
And then we could use her car, so we weren't really out.
So you were car, okay.
Yeah, although you didn't use it much. Yeah, I mean,
a couple of times.
You had it,
yeah.
but I don't think you used it that much. See, part of what makes this car share arrangement work to begin with is none of the three of us want to drive any more than we have to.
And none of you is commuting, is that correct? By car?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So this year-long experiment of me just borrowing the car for long trips happened probably 4 or 5 times, I think, over the course of the year. And that was a very functional, I think, a very functional chapter of our arrangement because we got to know each other, we learned to trust each other. I would go away with the car and it would come back in one piece, you know.
Well, there was that, and we experimented with trying to keep track of mileage, whether that was something we attempted to do it and found that it was unnecessary. We didn't need it once we
did a pretty good job of tracking it for that year, but we did nothing with the data.
Yeah.
We never looked at it.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, what are we doing this for?
Yeah.
So you were keeping track of your mileage and you were keeping track of yours just to see what kind of usage.
Yeah.
We were going to have a fun party at the end of the year to celebrate the person who drove the least amount of miles. But we never did that. And we've quit.
We joked at the beginning because we were pretty sure Sue was going to win the competition because she was so adamant, I don't want this car. In fact, what happened in the conversation as it evolved was Sue really liked the idea of the car living at my house. She didn't want it in her driveway. And that was kind of how I was picking up on the dynamics with you and Sue. Was like, she really does not want this car.
Yeah.
And she wants it out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. But, so
how did you evolve then from sort of this the year that you all tried this out? You took it did you take a next step? You did.
We
the
did.
Next step.
Yeah.
What evolved next for you?
did you approach me about formalizing?
We've been talking about next steps.
Okay.
And what to do.
That's right. You did approach me, I think, at least twice.
Yeah, and Judy's busy doing all sorts of things in town. We found time, and so what are those next steps? What are they going to look like? And I think initially one of the things was you thought you wanted to be an ownership. Or have an ownership.
Well, this is what was going on with me during that year was I was looking at my car going, am I really ready to stop owning a car? Am I really ready to relinquish this car? I'd had that car for, 16 years. And I was scared. I was actually kind of scared to let go of my car because you know how we relate to our cars is our freedom, it's our convenience factor, it's our autonomy.
The statement of who we are.
It's our sense of ownership and all that stuff. And I went, geez, can I really sell that car? Because I didn't want to buy into his car if I still owned this car, because then you're paying on 2 insurances. That didn't make any sense to me at all. So I was asking myself through that whole year, am I ready to sell? Am I ready to sell? And you said, are we ready to take the next steps? And I said, well, let's talk about it. So we did. And I realized if I bought into their car, then I would feel a sense of shared ownership. I could relinquish my car. And at the same time, just synchronistically, I had 2 people in our community come to me and say, we want to buy your car. I didn't even have
a little nudge there.
Yeah, I didn't have to advertise my car. So I sold it to people that I knew and bought into their car. So I think I paid half the value of the car.
And I let Judy set the value, so I thought it was very doable on her part.
Yeah. So we never went to the step of putting my name on the title, but we have a letter of agreement that lives in the car that's been notarized and signed by the 3 of us saying that I am a shared owner of the car.
Is there a reason you didn't put it on title? Her on title? Is there a complication?
If there is, I don't remember what it
Well,
was.
my recollection is that you wanted as little to do with corporate insurance companies, and if you could keep your name off of that part of it, you wanted to. Although she is on our insurance.
I am on.
It was very easy to add her name and pay the extra few dollars.
Actually, that was one of my questions. So you have insurance for you and Sue, right?
Yeah.
And
I've
the
been added
additional
as a driver.
and that
Yep.
was there was no insurance
Right
problem
over
with
the
that.
phone, it was a done deal.
Oh, great!
Really
I'm glad that wasn't a hurdle.
Yeah.
It seemed easier with his insurance company than it seemed when I checked it out with mine. And
And it was easier than we've tried to find insurance coverage based on miles driven. That's a new concept in some parts of the country, and we've been trying to get that, and it's not available in our state.
I see. Okay.
That's a big deal.
Because if what I would expect is an insurance company who saw that you were only driving 5,000 miles in a year is going to give you a better rate.
Exactly.
There are companies that
And so
operate
when they
that
get
way.
enlightened, it'll come along. That's a great idea.
We both did a little job of educating our insurance companies about the fact that that's what we wanted, and they said we don't have that product to sell you. But
I think they did want some information about you, just to check to make sure that you weren't a bad driver.
Well, yeah, and you had a history with your own insurance and your own car, which is so it.
Yep.
So this is the next phase. You sold your car.
I did. I sold my car. I turned that money and additional money into ownership of his
Into
car.
ownership of that car.
And we promptly drove the car over to her house and parked it.
It's true. It ended up in my driveway like that.
I love it. And Sue's happy, right?
I mean, there were so many shared motivations that we had. I mean, part of what I've discovered and realized in this arrangement is that all three of us were interested in saving money, and somewhere Sue read that car ownership, aside from car payments, costs like $8,000 a year.
It's quite high.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like,
very
whoa,
expensive.
we can mitigate those costs
Yes.
pretty handily by shared ownership.
Yep.
And we made agreements that I was going to take care of the cleanliness upkeep of the car, which one might say I've sort of done. And Richard was going to take care of the oil changes and the mechanical maintenance, and he also takes care of changing snow tires on and off. So, and that was like, wow, I'm not married, but it's kind of like I have a husband, you know?
Yeah, as far as the car care, I can get that.
Yeah.
And then, did you structure any kind of agreement? I mean, it's been fairly informal. Did you add any more into your agreement beyond the title and the shared insurance and who cares for what?
Probably not written down, but in discussions, there's been lots of, well, what if?
I said to him just the other day when we were thinking about talking to you about this, I said, you realize, of course, Richard, that part of the subtext of our agreement is that if any one of us totals the car, the other two people are willing to handle the loss without any blame.
That's trust.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's happening here. That's what's happening here.
That's true.
And Richard said, yeah, you know, I kind of feel bad for a while, but I'd never blame you.
Yeah, it's because you're all responsible
It's the
drivers.
ego that you have to get rid of, that for males especially, are tied into that car. It says something about me.
Who you are.
And so losing it would be losing that piece, I think. But it'd never be a fault on Judy's part.
Here's another piece of the ego that kind of was a funny thing for me. When I first started driving the car, I'd pull up in front of my friends' homes and stuff like that, and they wouldn't recognize me with that car. And I said, oh, I'm in a new car share arrangement. And they went, wow, we would have never thought you would be driving that car. It's black, it's a Scion. We call it the rolling toaster because it's just like square, you know. And I said, it's not the car that I would choose if I was going to a car dealership. I would never pick a car that looked like an SUV like that. But you know what? It is a really comfortable car. It's a really functional car. It gets relatively great gas mileage, and I can't complain about it.
What I hear is, for both of you, is that it moves you past the ego identification you had with the vehicle you have or the role you had with it.
Yep.
And in a sense, that kind of distancing makes it become the thing that cars were probably intended to be, a functional, useful tool.
Yeah.
A vehicle. And that's it. And that's all.
And it's made us need to work together cooperatively more to figure out ways when we both, I call her and I say, I need the car next week, and she says, but I've got something planned. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, how do you deal with it? Okay.
And we've had several occasions where the plans were pretty set, and we worked them out.
Yeah, there was one time when I was going to be driving down to Vancouver to visit some friends, and I think I gave Richard and Sue a couple months of heads up time. We tend to, one of the agreements is that we let each other know as soon as we know that we want to use the car, we let the other person know, even if it's a trip that's a long ways off.
Okay.
So that's kind of, we're aware, you know, what people's needs are. And I had the plan to use the car to drive down to Vancouver, and subsequent to that plan, Sue, who has gotten into rowing as a recreational activity, realized that there was a competition on that same weekend, and they need the car to take the boat.
Ah,
Too.
okay.
Long
Oh, right,
shell.
yes,
This long
yes,
shell.
yes.
And so they had me over, and they said, "Yeah, we really want to use the car this weekend. You're scheduled to use it. What do you think?" And Sue was like falling all over herself, saying, "I'll buy your train ticket. I'll drive you to the ferry. I'll take care of whatever I have to take care of in order to make this work so that we can take the boat to the competition." And I said, "You don't need to buy my train ticket, but I might accept a trip to the ferry." So because the three of us want to cooperate, we want to save money, we want to make this work. It's like what they say, what happens when you care for something bigger than yourself. You know, and it's bigger than me, it's bigger than Richard, it's bigger than Sue, it's bigger than their marriage. It's this collective decision. We want to be part of creating a different type of culture, and we know we have to change in order to make that work. So our conflicts are, I wouldn't even call them conflicts.
No.
They're not hard.
No.
They don't take long at all to work out. It's like one of us will say, "Oh, you know what, I don't need to take that trip anyway," or "I don't mind walking," or, "You know, I can catch the bus, no problem." So we have so many other alternatives available to us, including letting go of our attached trip. It's not a
And we're
conflict.
calling each other more often saying, "I'm going to go down and get hay or straw," or "Do you need anything on that trip?"
I was wondering whether that would happen, whether you do any shared errands
We do.
because of
We do.
because
Yeah.
you've got the car, the carrier, you know,
Yeah.
the cargo carrier.
The thing that's been interesting lately, just in the last month, I've always been a swimmer, and I just like to swim in the morning, and I realized at one point Richard was showing up at the pool, and I said, "You know, we should swim together sometimes." So we've now got a regular swimming date every Monday morning. We swim together.
Yeah. And we've tended to stay loose with this arrangement because we experimented with an online calendar.
That didn't work for like 3 days. did it?
Yeah, and it was just too much. So
Too cumbersome or too much
yeah, it's
hassle?
just
or...
too formal.
So you can just write it in your schedule book or a paper calendar or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I put it in. What do you do? I put it in my
Calendar by
daytimer.
the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
So-
good.
Your calendar.
I think one of the things about that, Janae, that I wanted to say was that I realize I am embodying a new paradigm before I see that I am before I realize that's what's going on. In other words, all of our attempts to track gas expenditures or mileage driven or weekends used or something like that, we do these things that are part of the old paradigm, but then we don't ever use the data. We don't really care. We're not attached to whether we have nickeled and dimed everything equitably about gas money. We're not paying attention to that.
I think that I would suggest that that's partly a function of who you are and the fact that because you all see yourself as being culture change agents, you know, you're pioneers. You're pioneering something that's bigger and more important than just yourself. You're willing to forego that. But there must be some internal sense of it's fair and equitable. It may not look like if we track all our miles, some year you might use more than they might use, but overall, in the big picture, you're comfortable with it.
One of the things that happens is our needs change,
Yes.
our circumstances change. Tell her about your accident.
6 months ago, I fell off my bicycle and broke my femur.
Sorry to hear
So-
that.
For 3 months, I didn't use the car at all,
Because he was bedridden.
and was bicycling before that accident a lot. So my use of the car was minimal. But now I'm not back on my bike yet, so I'm riding quite a bit more than had been before. So almost day to day, we're in touch with, I need the car for this trip because I can't just jump on my bike like I used to. I miss it, and I'll get back to it, but I'm just not there yet.
So lately the car's been back and forth and back and forth and back and forth a lot. Like sometimes we'll use it twice in the same day each. That might be the most.
The extreme.
And I think that, you know, when he was laid up in bed, the car was at my house sometimes 2 weeks in a row without Sue ever wanting to use it, unless she needed to go buy something too heavy to take on her bike. Sue's a trooper in terms of using her bike for just about everything she
Wow.
can. One time she wanted to borrow the car to bring your birthday present home, and it was something really heavy, and I said, well, I have to go downtown, how about if I pick up his birthday present? She said, great, so I picked it up and brought it back. So there's all this, you know, interface that we have that's very gentle and very easy, and I would say for me it's kind of fun just to see that it works.
You know, we haven't addressed as a group what would happen if somebody came to the decision that it wasn't working.
Yes.
How do you dissolve this?
Yes.
We don't have anything.
Okay.
We just assume that we'd work it out. But on a day-to-day basis, there's so many cool things about it. Like today I was driving to pick Judy up and somebody waved at me.
Yeah. Thinking I was
Think it was Judy.
Thinking it was Judy in
That's
Judy's
cool.
car.
That's cool. You got new friends here, Richard. That's great.
He's got strange women waving at him. He likes that.
The other, you know, in our last, 5 minutes here, is that what kinds of things have you learned sort of on anything else that we haven't covered, actually, I should say? Hurdles you haven't faced, the emotional conflicts, other stuff.
We have talked about adding to the fleet.
Ah.
And what might that look like? You know, is it an electric vehicle? Is it a truck to haul manure? Maybe electric modified bicycle? And then
other people. We talked
other
about
people.
adding
Other
other people.
people,
Yes.
And we've had a couple, maybe 3-4 conversations about that have gone to some length, and I personally feel like that adds layers of complexity to this that have some attraction to them, but I feel more resistant. You know, to be quite honest, I feel like that is going to make it more complicated. Now, I like the idea of having different types of vehicles in a pool that people can draw from as a pool, but the way we're doing that right now is sort of more informally, where one time I needed a car for a week-long vacation, they needed the car at the same time, and I actually rented a relative's car for that week-long vacation for $20 a day. They let me use their car for $100 or something like that. So that we find other alternatives, but he brought up one time that he wanted to have some guy join our group, and this person does a lot of traveling out of town, and I said, I don't want that person in this group, because part of what makes this work is all three of us are very place-based. We all want to live in Port Townsend, we all want to be in Port Townsend, we want to support our local economy, and we travel for recreation or to see friends socially, but it's not, we have comparable use of the car. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a key, is that if you have about comparable use, it makes it feel like an equitable arrangement.
It is.
And it also strikes me is that the amount of usage for the vehicle is about right for the scheduling demands and for just usage of the vehicle itself. Because if you had to have the intricacy of, say, even 2 more people in this, the vehicle would get used more. It's more arrangements, more scheduling, and so on. Might be tougher.
I think it's feasible if you add more people, if you also add in other vehicle options. But still, like I know the Eco Village has an electric car that's used by, 6 or 8 different people?
Yeah, it's owned by one family, but they all get to use it.
They all get to use it, and I think that that's another type of arrangement where it's a very unique vehicle that's only suitable for in-town trips. But because it's electric, it's definitely not using as much of the fossil fuel factor, and it got used a lot. So there's that. The other thing that happened is there's these other 2 couples that have a car share arrangement where one couple has 2 cars, the other couple only has 1 car. So this couple uses the extra car when needed. And one thing that happened about 2 months ago is one of the people in our community had kidney stone attack at like 7 o'clock in the morning. And the couple with 1 car had been called, will you help me get to the hospital? And their car was gone. And so he had a key and access to this other car, and the woman was able to get to the hospital because of the car share versatility factor. And that was really nice to know that these arrangements can benefit people outside the arrangements. Do you know what I mean?
And what I hear is that just having access to a neighbor's key, I mean, to have an very, very informal, occasional...
That's another version
is
of
another
this.
version of a car sharing that people might want to try, and particularly the special use vehicle. I can imagine a freight vehicle or truck, a pickup truck or something would be a great shared, which you could have with a larger number of people, because it's going to get used a little less frequently. Any other last thoughts?
I just want to encourage people to recognize that beyond the fear of the change, there's huge benefits that you can't necessarily anticipate until you're actually into the arrangements. Like I was a little reticent. You know, that whole first year, I was like, okay, this is a good enough way for us to interact with each other. And now that we're into it more fully, I'm so glad that I was able to go there. And they had the experience of being carless in their memory bank. I didn't. And I'm just really glad I've done it.
And to me, we're so tied into the car and the convenience that it provides that finding good alternatives to that, one person, one car, drive it whenever I want, are really lacking in our country, even in a city with good transit. It's still not that kind of convenient. So we need to build those kind of systems. And even
this is like a segue into
this
a better
is one
public
step in that
transit
direction.
system.
Well, what I see that it has going for it is you still have the versatility of a small private vehicle, right? And thus the convenience, though it's diminished from having it one car, one person, it's not insurmountable. It's plenty fine.
It's plenty.
You know, 6 blocks away, you can drive over, give her the car, she drives you home, and you know you're on your way. Because there are situations where people don't have good transit. They can't bike for various reasons.
Right.
The weather, whatever.
This is a good
really
arrangement
nice.
for that.
And if we're looking at how do we reduce the usage, this seems to me like a really natural step.
Took potentially 2 cars out of the community.
Yeah, because there's 3 of us using
That's
one.
right. That's right.
The other day I was dropping the car off for Richard and he says, "Judy, you want to ride home?" And I said, "Richard, don't enable me, I'm walking."
And the subtext that I hear as well is you're building your relationships, you're building community, your friendships, you know. It's like you also know, because you live alone, Judy, that there's some folks that are here for you. I bet you in other levels than just this car share.
That way.
And I think that I've got my eye to what are those things that can help folks that are living alone, that as we are getting older may need to have
A support system.
A good support system of various types.
It builds a network of relatedness and connectivity that's totally enriched my life in lots of ways. And really, thank you for coming to me to ask me if I would share your car.
Well, thank you both for coming all the way over here to talk about this, and I hope that a lot of people decide to follow in your, well, it's not footsteps exactly, follow in your wheel tracks. How's that? Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sue, who's invisible but part of the whole arrangement here.
Yes, she is.
Thank you.
You're watching Peak Moment, locally reliant living for challenging times. I'm with Judy and Richard of Port Townsend, whose car sharing could be like what you might want to be doing. Join us next time.